Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Josephine here, and today I want to talk with you about my books that I've read between January and June, so the first half of 2021. And I want to talk with you about the books that I really liked, the books that I really didn't like, and then some surprises and disappointments. But before I dive into the books, let's start with some stats. So I've read a total of 67 books in the first half of the year. Before you're completely freaking out, I usually don't read that many books. So I should say there's a caveat. One is, in June we had that Olympic readathon where I read double the amount of books that I usually read. So I think I read 18 books in June, and I'm usually not reading that much. So my average really is around 9 books, depending on the length. And then in the beginning, I read a lot of short stories. The Amazon, what's it called, Foundation series, I think. That's 6 short stories that are all under 100 pages. I've added audiobooks to my reading, and all of that adds to the number of books. So if you look at it, I probably would have read a lot less. Not probably, I would have read a lot less if I wouldn't have had all the short stories in there. So if you combine all the short stories in one book, we are probably more towards high 50s or something. Most of the books that I read were from female authors, even though I did not actively look for female authors, but I think that's pretty good. And even though the majority of authors in general that I read are from the US and the UK, I actively looked for authors from other countries to get more influence to their culture, to their writing style, and I had some really good books because of that. The majority of books are between 300 and 400 pages. I rate them either 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 stars. The majority of books that I've read from a genre perspective fall under fantasy and sci-fi and in the adult category. I only had 5 DNFs. I had 5 rereads, and one of those rereads was actually within this year. So I read the book in May, and then I read it again in June. And the majority of books that I read were actual physical books, followed by Kindle, and then I started using my library more, and I started listening to audiobooks more. So I expect this number to go up for the second half of the year. But let's talk about my books, and I put that into 4 categories. I have worst, of course, you have to talk about worst. Worst, best, surprising, and disappointing. And I will start off with worst and disappointing, and then I go into surprising and best. So I thought that would be a good arc for this video. And to start off with the worst, so 3 of those books are A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I read end to end, and then I DNF'd actually A Court of Mist and Fury. And the other one that falls into the same category for me is The Blade of Secrets. And all of those 3 I was actually interested in. So the ACOTAR and the ACOMAF one, if that's the right acronym, they were actually recommended to me by a friend, and she loved the series. She also loves the whole Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I just read it and I couldn't get along with the writing style. It was just not for me. And very similar on The Blade of Secrets. I was super excited. The cover looked amazing, but the premise also sounded really, really great. And the premise in the book, while I was reading this, I was like, I would have loved this as a more deeper dive type of story, but it was just too juvenile. Those 3 fall into kind of that same bucket for me, and that's why they ended up in my worst category of the first half. The other one, and that's probably an unpopular opinion, is Strange the Dreamer. That was a buddy read, so I'm part of Michael Knipp's Patreon thingy. The patrons can pick one buddy read, so they can all suggest a bunch of buddy reads, and then he puts them in a list, and then we can all vote for what we like. At 1 month it was Strange the Dreamer. I haven't heard anything about it at that time. I didn't know what this book was about. They just said it's beautiful writing, which it truly is, and that they said it is slow, which it truly is as well. But those were not the reasons for me. The reasons why I DNF'd it and why I actually don't understand the popularity is the things that happen in the book. I think I read a little bit more than a quarter of the book. Not quite half, but a little bit more. So maybe a third. That makes sense. Math. Awesome. So about a third of the book. And within that third, there were way too many descriptions of young adults or not adults, under 18 years old, and how they look like in slightly translucent underwear and descriptions of body parts. And I'm usually not uncomfortable easy. I love bloody, gory, really creepy books, but this kind of rubbed me the wrong way. There were 3 descriptions just within that first third of the book where I was like, those are children that you're talking about. That is not okay. No. And that's why I decided to DNF it. The story itself, I think his name was Even Strange, right? I actually was really interested in. I really wanted to hear how it continues. I liked him as a character. I think the writing was really good. I loved the lyrical part of it, even though usually I'm not big into literary books, but it was really beautiful. But that was just the point. After the first time, I was kind of already... The second time, was not as bad, but the third time, and that was a really detailed description of a young kid. I mean, it was not young as in 6 years old. It was already in its teenage years, but no. So these 4 books are in my worst category. Now let's talk about my disappointing books of the first half of 2021, starting with Lore. And here I have to say it's a caveat. I really liked Lore. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars and I enjoyed it. It was fast paced. It was a really fun story because I like mythology. It was just marketed the wrong way, and that's why it was disappointing for me. It felt more, I knew it was about Greek mythology and they were talking about, pieces of the story being aligned to that, but for me there was not enough of it. It was pretty much an urban fantasy with gods that had the same names as the ones in the Greek mythology, and then there were some little tidbits in there, but for me it was just not enough, and I was expecting more based on the marketing hype that they put around this book. Only that's why it was disappointing. Again, I really enjoyed it. It was a quick read. It was a fun story. Nothing I will probably read again because of that, but that was one of those books. It was just disappointing because the marketing did the wrong thing there. The next one was The Lost Apothecary, which I read in June, and that was disappointing because this cover, talk about the most gorgeous cover in the world. It is so beautiful. Every time I walked past it in the bookstore, I was like, it was just, angels singing. It is such a beautiful cover, and very similar here again. The marketing did such an amazing job on hyping up the story and designing the beautiful cover and presenting it as something that it at the end was not. I listened to this as an audiobook. It was slow. It was really, really slow. And then there was a lot of women, young and grown-up old women, just whining about how bad their life is because of the men that are in their life. I'm like, get over it. Seriously, it's your life. It's in your hand. Unbelievable how much whining there was about the men in their life. And that's nothing I can handle. And yeah, that's why I didn't like this book. The next one that I read was All Systems Red. And that is, I think, one of those situations where it was just overhyped. It was a good book. It was great writing, but it was not as fun and quirky as everybody made it sound. It was a pretty normal story, I found. I didn't find it particularly funny. I didn't find it particularly entertaining. It was a very quick read because it was a short story, but that's all there is to it. And I DNF'd the series, or not the book itself. I read the book end to end, but I DNF'd the series because I was just like, you know what? It's not too interesting for me, not the type of stories I like, and it's not as funny. So I will just not continue with it. Alrighty, let's talk about the most surprising books this year. Starting with Zed. Zed is kind of a futuristic sci-fi book where it is about an AI that is controlling the world. And I love those type of tropes and those type of stories. But the rating was not really great, so I didn't expect too much, but I loved the cover, which has kind of a weird beetle on top of it. So I bought it because of the cover. And then I read it, and I loved it. It was such a great story. The humor in it is super funny. It's a British author, And you can really see that because there is this typical British humor in it a lot, and how the conversations and the dialogue is happening is really witty. I love how the story actually plays out. It has really beautiful writing too, something that I wouldn't expect from a book like that necessarily either. And it just delivered. It was really a great entry reading. I recommended it to a couple of other people that have, one of them I know has read it since then too, and she loved it as well. She was really excited about this story. So if you like stories with where an eye takes over the world and then something goes wrong, Zad is a really great piece for this trope or for this type of story, and it was super fun. And especially if you like British humor and British wittiness, this is perfect for you. It was just such a blast. It was super fun to read. The next one along a similar line is Machine Hood, and I actually have a review up for that, so I will link that somewhere. Worst case, you find it in the description, which I wasn't so sure about because of the cover mainly. I was not a huge fan of the cover design, but then the story was just so much fun. She's an Indian author who clearly knows her way around technology and her way around genes and how all of that stuff works, because you could see it in this story that she knows what she's writing about. And I love this one in particular because it was very realistic for the time in the future it plays on where artificial intelligence will be at that time. And the story itself was incredibly creative. I don't think I've read anything like this before. And I really like the way she talks about how humans will live together with AI in the future and what challenges we might be facing. And I also loved how she weaved in religion into a really technology-driven story and world, and how those two things fit together. And this third surprise, I'm seeing kind of a a theme here. It's all sci-fi. Not on purpose, but my third surprise was The Android's Dream. Not to mix up with Do Androids Dream of Sheep, different book, but The Android's Dream from John Scalzi, which was just so much fun. It was hilarious. I love his writing style. I love the sarcasm in the book. It's just a really fun sci-fi story. And I love the witty dialogues. I love the characters. And I listened to that as an audiobook. And I actually just received the paperback version because I had to order it as a physical book form. So I can read it again pretty soon. So I might add another reread this year onto my list of rereads. So to finish it up, let's talk about the best books that I've read so far in this year. And I have 3 for you. The first one is The Test by Sylvain Novelle. It's a short story again, and it's a sci-fi. I think it falls into the sci-fi category of a person participating in the UK citizenship test. And that citizenship test is not what you would think of it. It's not just, a multiple choice that you have to fill out and talk to someone. It's very different. And it was so surprising to me. I loved it. I was really excited about how well he described the world. Well, the world is just that citizenship test, so there's not a huge world in there. But how well he described it in the 100 some odd pages, I don't know, 120, 140, something around that ilk. It was so interesting the way he talked us through that citizenship test and the way he explained some of the reasoning of like the government and other people, how he described the experience of the person going through the citizenship test and the thoughts that he has and the worries that he has. It was just really gripping and really pulled me into this character and made me feel for him. And because of that, it is definitely one of my best books in the first half of the year. The next one is a thriller. It's from the author pair Liv Constantine. That took me by surprise. I love the premise already. So for thrillers, I try to go in as blind as possibly. Well, in general, with a lot of books, I actually do that. But with thrillers in particular, I don't want to know anything about it. And I just read the premise on the dust jacket, and it just sounded really exciting. But it delivered it so well. And that plot twist at the end, I don't think I've ever read a thriller with such an amazing plot twist at the end of the book. Literally the last, 30 pages, 40 or 30 pages, where it's just sitting there. I was finishing it up while I was sitting in bed, and I had to yell out loud, "What's happening here?" And my husband was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" But it's mind-blowingly well written. And that plot twist was something I mean, till today, if I just think about it, it's oh my goodness, you have to read it. Because obviously I can't tell anything about it, but well written, super fast read, amazing story. It's just, that's all I want to say. Go in as blind as you can. It's just amazing. And if you like the writing style, I read The Last Miss Parrish, which was also really good. And I'm really looking forward to The Stranger in the Mirror, which is the new book. I haven't read that yet. And then there's another one. I forgot what it was. And then the last book that I want to talk about, which is hands down the best book that I've read this year so far, is Project Hail Mary. There's no way around it. This was amazing and very similar to The Wife Stalker. I went into it blind, and I recommend that for everyone. Don't watch the reviews. Don't read too much about it, because it will take away the joy that you experience reading this book. There's so much happening in there, and it's so easy to spoil this book that just go get it. Go get it. And I read it first, and then I reread it as an audiobook. And the audiobook, oh my goodness, they did such a good job with the narration. That narrator is so incredibly talented. I already looked up other audiobooks that person did. Oh, incredible. I mean, even if you don't like sci-fi, read this book, seriously. A warning up front, you'll go through all the emotions in this book. It is from laughing to crying to hoping to hating, everything. Literally all the emotions you will experience in this book. It is, I don't know what Andy Weir did. I've never read another book from him. I've obviously watched The Martian, but I've actually never read the book. I mean, yes, just read it. If you prefer audiobooks, listen to it as an audiobook. If you prefer reading it as a book, read it as a book. But do yourself a favor and listen to it as an audiobook at a later point, because the narrator does some things just great. All right, that's it for my best, worst, most surprising, and most disappointing books of the first half of 2021. Is there a book that you've read and you would agree with me? Or is there a book that you've read and you completely disagree with me? Which I could see for Strange to the Dreamer and Akota happening. I'm sorry. What were your best and worst books of 2021? I would love to hear what you've read so far and what you really liked. Is there something that I should pick up too? Not that I need more books on my super humongous TBR, but I'm always ears for recommendations. And then I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I see you soon with my next video. Bye!